Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to deconstruct the mechanics of emotional intelligence. In our modern world, we place an enormous emphasis on standard intelligence. We focus on being smart, capable, and highly skilled. Yet, time and time again, research shows us that something else entirely is often the true predictor of long-term success, stability, and fulfillment. So we're going to take a calm, documentary-style look at the architecture of human emotion. Our goal today is to understand exactly why the ability to navigate our feelings is arguably the most critical skill we can develop.
Think about a profile we've all encountered at some point. The technically brilliant individual. They have a high IQ, great grades, and incredibly impressive skills on paper. But in practice, well, they struggle in relationships, handle criticism poorly, and often end up creating tension in the room. Now, contrast that with a completely different profile. This person might not have the highest test scores, yet they naturally build trust. They stay calm under pressure, lead teams effectively, and connect with people effortlessly. The fundamental difference between these two people isn't their cognitive processing power, it's their emotional intelligence. So, what actually is emotional intelligence? Often referred to as EQ or EI, the definition is surprisingly simple, yet really complex to execute in real life. It's the ability to recognize, understand, and manage emotions, both your own and those of the people around you. While IQ measures your logical and analytical abilities, EQ measures how well you deal with human behavior. Think of it as the operating system for social navigation. Let's start by breaking down the anatomy of EQ. Psychologist Daniel Goleman helped popularize this concept by dividing it into 5 foundational pillars. First, self-awareness. Second, self-regulation. Third, motivation. Fourth, empathy. And fifth, social skills. Now, it's incredibly important to note that having a high EQ does not mean simply being nice all the time. It's also not about hiding your feelings or being passive. Someone with high emotional intelligence still gets angry, stressed, or hurt. The difference lies entirely in this framework. They understand what they're feeling, and they use these 5 pillars to deliberately respond, rather than just instinctively react. Now let's look at the internal mechanisms and how emotional intelligence actually works in practice. Well, everything begins with self-awareness. The crucial starting point is a simple internal monologue. What emotion am I actually feeling right now? This sounds completely obvious, but in reality, many people are emotionally reactive without ever realizing what's actually driving them. They might claim they're doing fine while their body language screams frustration. Or they may become defensive in a meeting without realizing they're actually just feeling insecure. Highly self-aware people build in a mental pause. They identify the feeling exactly as it happens, because you fundamentally cannot manage an emotion that you don't first recognize. Once you recognize the emotion, you have to actually do something with it. And that brings us to self-regulation. There's a sharp contrast here between managing emotions and merely suppressing them. Suppression is what a lot of people mistake for control. For example, swallowing your frustration during a tense project update usually just buries the feeling, which causes much bigger, explosive problems later on. Managing emotions, on the other hand, means feeling the emotion fully, without letting it take the steering wheel. It's about experiencing the stress or the anger while still maintaining your executive function. We've all been here, right? When criticized or provoked, a person with poor self-regulation fires off that angry text message immediately. They just let the initial surge of adrenaline dictate their actions. But a person with strong self-regulation implements a strategic pause. They still feel the anger, it hasn't magically disappeared, but they process it. And then they decide how to respond in a way that actually serves their long-term goals. That pause, that is exactly where emotional intelligence lives. Let's move to the external pillars. Empathy isn't just about feeling sorry for someone. It's the highly attuned ability to read nonverbal data. This means picking up on a subtle tone of voice, microscopic facial expressions, body language, and shifts in a room's energy. People with high empathy notice the signals that others miss entirely, like a colleague quietly withdrawing from a group conversation. They engage in perspective-taking. They actively ask themselves why someone might be viewing a situation completely differently than they are, and that drastically changes the way they approach communication. So when you combine self-awareness, self-regulation, and empathy, it all culminates in social skills. This is the visible manifestation of EQ. It covers active listening, handling conflict calmly, building trust, communicating clearly, and influencing others without relying on manipulation. People with strong social skills naturally adjust to their environment. They know when it's time to speak up, when it's time to stay quiet, and when to be direct. Ultimately, their highest skill is making the people around them feel deeply understood. But why does all of this matter so much? Let's look at the biological imperative. For our early ancestors, social cooperation and reputation were quite literally survival tools. Today, the battlefield has changed, but the biological rules really haven't. If we look at our careers, low EQ leads to failure through ego, poor communication, and unnecessary conflict. You can be brilliant, but if no one wants to work with you, you're gonna struggle. High EQ, however, helps you rise by building trust and handling pressure. In relationships, low EQ causes impulsive reactions and misread intentions, which slowly destroys trust over time. High EQ allows people to handle disagreements safely. And perhaps most importantly, in terms of mental health, low EQ leaves people trapped in confusing emotional spirals. High EQ, meanwhile, allows for faster recovery from setbacks and much better stress management.
There's a core concept that summarizes this mental health aspect perfectly. High emotional awareness creates clarity, and clarity creates control. When you don't know why you feel a certain way, you are completely at the mercy of your environment. But by understanding the mechanics of your own mind, you remove that confusion. You effectively step back into the driver's seat of your own life.
This brings us to deliberate practice and how to actually improve your emotional intelligence. You might be asking a highly practical question right now. What if I'm just not naturally emotionally intelligent? Can this actually be improved? The answer is a definitive yes. Unlike IQ, which remains relatively fixed throughout your adult life, emotional intelligence is highly trainable. It responds beautifully to deliberate practice. This includes methods like mindfulness, journaling to track your emotional triggers, deliberately forcing a pause before you react, practicing active listening, asking for honest feedback, and reflecting on your historical patterns. The objective here isn't to rewire yourself into an emotionless robot. The goal is simply to become deeply emotionally aware so that you are no longer emotionally controlled. When we distill all of this source material down, it leaves us with one fundamental truth. IQ helps people solve technical problems, but EQ helps people solve human problems. Because we are inherently social creatures, living and working in deeply interconnected environments, almost all real-world, long-term problems are ultimately human problems. So I want to leave you with a question to reflect on. Look at your own daily life, your career, and your relationships. Are you spending all your time trying to solve the technical problems while entirely ignoring the human ones? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Take some time to pause, reflect on your own emotional architecture, and I'll see you next time.